Hello everyone. In 2011, a murderer caused widespread fear, especially among women, who became cautious and apprehensive. Many were too scared to go out alone, even during the day, and if they stayed home, they made sure to have family members around. This deranged killer was none other than Jiao Changfeng. Starting in 2011, Feng committed a series of crimes across provinces such as Zhejiang, Hubei, Hunan, and Chongqing, amounting to a total of 52 cases. Due to the extremely brutal methods and severe consequences of his crimes, the Ministry of Public Security listed him as a Class B wanted criminal and offered a reward of 200,000 yuan for his capture. However, it wasn't until 6 years later that the police finally managed to apprehend him. How was Jiao Changfeng eventually caught? And what were the horrifying crimes he committed? Don't leave the screen, as we are about to delve into the details of this deranged murderer, Jiao Changfeng. Unhappy childhood. Jiao Changfeng was born in 1991 into an ordinary family in Xining County, Hubei Province. However, unlike ordinary people, he did not take his father's surname, but his mother's, because his father was living as a son-in-law in the Jiao family. During that time, son-in-laws held a very low status and were often looked down upon by others. Due to his father's position, Changfeng was frequently met with disdainful looks from others, which fostered a deep resentment towards his father from a young age. However, what he did not expect was that a few years later, his father would do something that would make him hate him even more. When Jiao Changfeng was 10 years old, his father, in a moment of losing control, behaved inappropriately toward Changfeng's aunt. When this incident was discovered, the Jiao family immediately became the subject of gossip in the village. Whether adults or children, everyone discussed the matter as if it were a regular story. Every time he went outside, Changfeng could always feel the probing eyes and hear the whispers behind his back. Changfeng's father was imprisoned because of that incident, and just a few days later, he passed away. Although he still harbored resentment towards his father, the loss of his father at such a young age left Changfeng deeply saddened. The sorrow of losing a loved one, combined with the disdainful looks from the villagers, created a deep psychological wound in his heart. From then on, he gradually became more withdrawn and irritable. When he went to school, Changfeng often received poor grades and was frequently mocked by his classmates, which made him even more isolated from his peers. He no longer talked to anyone, no longer liked to play, and hardly cared about the people around him. It could be said that the only person he could talk to at that time was his mother. However, not long after his father's death, his mother remarried, and they had a child together. Since then, Changfeng felt like a burden to the family. As a result, after finishing elementary school, he stopped his education and went to work with the people in the village. However, due to his low level of education and young age, he was unable to find a decent job. Ultimately, he could only take on physically demanding work in factories. During his time at work, Feng never initiated conversations with anyone. After work, he would lie motionless in his rented room, doing little besides eating, sleeping, and working. As he grew older and reached puberty, there was no one to educate him about human sexuality, nor did he have anyone he could confide in. Gradually, he became engrossed in pornographic books. A few years later, Feng became a tall 20-year-old man, but he remained reserved and spent his days absorbed in collecting various pornographic books. At this time, his neighbors were a family of 4, a couple with the surname Xia and their 2 children. The elder daughter was 7 years old, and the younger son was 5. Mr. Xia was a kind and gentle man who occasionally exchanged a few words with Feng. As a result, the 2 children were familiar with him and regarded him as a friendly neighbor. Cruel crime. On December 1st, 2011, Feng returned to his rented room as usual. Picking up a pornographic book lying nearby, he began to read. To his surprise, after only a short while, the explicit content stirred feelings of restlessness and agitation within him. Unable to control his emotions or decide what to do, Feng's gaze fell on the young girl from the neighboring family, who happened to be home alone. A malicious thought immediately surfaced in the twisted mind of this deviant man. Moving stealthily, Feng approached the neighbor's door. After carefully scanning the surroundings to ensure no one was nearby, he knocked on the door. Inside, the little girl, who was completely unaware of any danger, heard the knock. Having seen Feng around and trusting him as a familiar face, she opened the door without the slightest suspicion. She had no idea that the man standing before her was nothing less than a predator in disguise. Jiao Changfeng entered the room and immediately rushed toward the young girl. Before she could react or resist, he overpowered her. A small child like her stood no chance against the strength of a grown man, and within moments, she was crying out in pain. However, Feng showed no trace of humanity. He did not stop his despicable actions and continued his assault without mercy. Just as his heinous act was ongoing, the girl's younger brother returned home from outside. Stepping through the door, the boy was horrified to find his sister lying on the ground, her clothing disheveled and in disarray. The quick-witted boy immediately turned around and ran outside, shouting for help. But Feng, unwilling to let him escape, quickly grabbed him and dragged him back into the house. Picking up a knife from the table, he struck the boy without hesitation. The blow was fatal, and the boy died on the spot. The nightmare did not end there. Feng looked at the young girl, still lying unconscious on the ground. Fearful that she might wake up and expose his crimes, he picked up the knife again and killed her. After murdering both children, Feng finally realized the enormity of the crime he had committed. Overcome with panic, he fled the scene empty-handed, too afraid to return and gather his belongings. When the children's parents returned home, they were devastated to find the lifeless bodies of their two children in such a horrific state. They immediately reported the crime to the police. Investigators quickly identified the suspect through DNA samples collected from the victims, Jiao Changfeng, their former neighbor. The police launched a manhunt for Feng. To capture the monster as quickly as possible, they set up checkpoints at intersections across Zhejiang province and even placed officers to monitor his family's residence. However, despite an extensive search that lasted 6 months, the police were unable to uncover any trace of Feng. The police speculated that Feng had likely fled Zhejiang province. As a result, they reported the situation to higher authorities and issued a nationwide arrest warrant to capture the monster. However, what they didn't realize was that Feng was hiding right under their noses. Although Feng was not highly educated, he was cunning enough to choose an effective hiding spot. After committing the crime, he didn't immediately leave Zhejiang, but instead found an abandoned house to lie low. Only when the public attention surrounding him started to subside did he stealthily leave the county, retreating into the deep forest. Once in the forest, Feng survived by drinking water from streams when he was thirsty and foraging for wild vegetables and fruits when he was hungry. Over time, the harsh life in the wilderness began to wear on him. After much deliberation, he decided to take the risk of returning to his hometown to seek help from his mother. However, a person's nature is difficult to change. On his way back to his hometown, the demon Jiao Changfeng committed yet another heinous crime. That day, while traveling along the road, Feng spotted a young girl not far ahead. A dark impulse stirred within him. It had been a long time since he had had any contact with another person. He quickly scanned his surroundings and confirmed that no one else was nearby. Without hesitation, he approached the girl. Taking advantage of her momentary distraction, Feng grabbed her tightly and dragged her into a nearby orange grove by the roadside, intent on assaulting her. The girl resisted fiercely, screaming desperately for help. Fearing discovery, Feng used one hand to strangle her neck while using the other to cover her mouth. Within moments, the girl lost consciousness. Once his vile desires were satisfied, Feng fled the scene in a hurry. Instead of returning home, Feng once again retreated into the deep forest, resuming his life of seclusion. Occasionally, he ventured out, sometimes to scavenge for food, sometimes to steal valuables. If he happened to encounter a woman traveling alone, he would assault and even murder her, adding to his unforgivable list of crimes. Feng's actions at the time struck terror into the hearts of the local people. No one dared allow their daughters to go outside alone, and even at home, they made sure an adult was always present. In response, the The police organized multiple operations to apprehend Feng based on information provided by local residents. However, every attempt ended in failure. The primary reason for this was Feng's habit of frequently changing his hiding spots without any discernible pattern, making it extremely difficult for the authorities to pinpoint his location. On February 18, 2013, a 15-year-old girl named Lin was on her way back from delivering lunch to her older sister, who was in the 12th grade, along with her cousin. On their way home, the two cousins decided to play a game where they would split up and race to see who could get home first. However, this innocent game led Lin to encounter the monster, Diao Changfeng. By chance, Changfeng spotted Lin walking alone, and he quickly seized the opportunity. He grabbed her tightly and dragged her into a vegetable garden, intending to carry out a horrific act. But Lin, surprisingly strong, fought back fiercely, screaming for help. Fearing that her cries would attract attention, Changfeng pulled out a sharp knife he had on him and stabbed her. Moments later, Lin stopped breathing. Unconcerned by his brutal actions, the twisted man proceeded to satisfy his perverse desires with her lifeless body. Once he was done, he callously dismembered Lin's body and buried the parts in an abandoned graveyard. Afterward, he fled to a park in Liangping County, Chongqing, to hide. On March 31, 2015, when Feng returned to his hideout, he saw a woman walking alone in the park. He followed her stealthily, and when he was sure that no one was around, he dragged her into the bamboo forest next to the mountain road. But just as he was about to commit the violent act, the woman's phone suddenly rang. The ringing of the phone startled Feng, causing him to loosen his grip, and thanks to that, the woman escaped. Feng was still fearless, and on August 12, 2015, he wandered around the park again. At this time, he suddenly saw a 16-year-old girl sitting alone, playing with her phone. After looking around and seeing that no one was around, Feng sneaked up behind the girl again. He immediately dragged her up a nearby hill and raped her. All the above incidents are just small grains of sand in the desert of this devil's crimes. He also raped and committed depraved acts with many other people, and most of the time he succeeded. Feng's recklessness increased. In the following years, he continued to commit many consecutive rapes. This situation lasted until 2017, during which time he committed a total of 13 rapes, causing 4 deaths, many of which were minor girls because according to his beliefs, and when reading books, he concluded that these minor girls were all virgins. Not only that, during his time on the run, Feng also stole other people's property many times. Over many years, he committed 42 cases, with the amount of money stolen reaching more than 70,000 yuan. The main reason why Feng escaped the police's pursuit many times was his ability to hide. Another reason is that he chose quite remote crime locations, so when the police arrived, he had already escaped. Evil must pay. Changfeng believed that with his caution, he could evade the law forever. However, he did not know that the law would never forgive someone as wicked as him. After years of searching, Changfeng finally made a mistake. On July 8, 2017, while hiding in Yuanling County, Huaihua City, Hunan Province, Changfeng went out to find food. Suddenly, he heard voices from a nearby narrow path. Fearing being discovered, he quickly hid in a small forest by the roadside. Through the gaps in the tree trunks, he saw a young girl hopping towards him. Behind her, not too far away, was an elderly woman, presumably her grandmother. At that moment, the grandmother was on the phone, not paying attention to the girl. Seeing the distance between them, Changfeng felt a rush of excitement. As the girl got closer to his hiding spot, Changfeng jumped out, covered her mouth with one hand, and grabbed her arm with the other, pulling her deep into the forest. It wasn't until the grandmother hung up the phone that she realized her granddaughter had gone missing, which terrified her. She immediately began searching for the girl along the mountain road, calling out her name. Her shouting quickly caught the attention of a gas station worker named Zhang. When he learned that the girl was missing, Zhang immediately suggested using an electric bike to help search for her. Not long after leaving the gas station, they found one of the girl's shoes in a patch of grass. Zhang stopped the bike to investigate. He quickly discovered a distinct drag mark in the grass. so he followed the trail. Soon after, he heard a cry for help from ahead. Upon reaching the source of the sound, Zhang saw a man attempting to harm the young girl. Zhang immediately shouted to stop him. The shout startled Changfeng, who had no time to focus on the girl anymore. He quickly pulled up his pants and ran deeper into the forest. Zhang immediately chased after him. Furious at what he had witnessed, Zhang was determined not to let Changfeng escape. As he chased him, Zhang shouted for help from nearby people. His cries caught the attention of locals working nearby. Upon understanding the situation, they immediately left their work and joined the effort to capture Changfeng. Cornered and without any weapons, Changfeng eventually knelt and begged for his life. However, the people refused to forgive someone so evil, capable of such horrors. Realizing he had no way out, Changfeng seized the opportunity when the crowd was distracted and fled into a bush by the riverbank. The villagers, seeing him refuse to leave the bushes, picked up nearby stones and began throwing them at him. The hail of stones terrified Changfeng, forcing him to run out of the bushes and toward the river. Seeing him attempt to flee again, Zhang and the villagers immediately spread out to surround him. In the end, with everyone working together, they subdued and pinned Changfeng to the ground, though he still struggled desperately. To prevent him from escaping, one of the villagers used a belt to tie around his neck, forcing him to submit. Zhang then called the police. When the local authorities arrived, they discovered that they had captured Changfeng, the man wanted by the Ministry of Public Security. After 6 years of evading justice, this monstrous individual was finally apprehended and brought to face the consequences of his actions. On April 5, 2019, the court sentenced Changfeng to death for his crimes, including premeditated murder, rape, desecration of a corpse, and theft. On April 23, 2020, after approval from the Supreme People's Court, Changfeng was executed by firing squad. Before the trial, the police had contacted Changfeng's mother to inform her of her son's situation. She was shocked, unable to comprehend how her son could be so extreme and cruel. After a long silence, she simply said, "It's as if I never gave birth to this child," and hung up the phone. After handling Changfeng's case, the police held a ceremony to honor the brave individuals who helped capture him, awarding them a total of 200,000 yuan as a reward. The life of Changfeng was a series of misfortunes, each leading to a distorted character inside him. The lack of parental love and the contempt he faced led him down the wrong path, making continuous mistakes, including reading obscene books. However, the choices we make are ours to bear. Changfeng failed to control himself and chose to descend further into crime. He caused immeasurable pain to many young girls, and the youngest of his victims was only 7 years old. His crimes were deserving of the harshest punishment.